Hello and welcome to another episode of the Executive Hub Show, the show that helps you grow your business with simple tips and strategies from successful entrepreneurs. My guest today is Jonathan Bunten. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you. How's your day so far?
Going extremely well. I'm excited to be here.
Love it. And so we're talking about how empowering women through financial education, access, and opportunity. Let me do the proper introduction for John, and we're going to dive into a very interesting conversation. Jonathan Bunten, co-founder of Big Delta Capital, empowers women through financial education, access, and opportunity. He drives wealth building initiatives and champions allyship, focusing on networks, education, and real opportunities. As CEO of RecorGroup, John led its rapid growth, landing 4 times on the Inc. 5000 list. And as a former U.S. Army officer, his leadership drives collaboration, supports women-led ventures, and promotes financial equity. Welcome, John.
Thank you very much for having me.
Great to have you. Whereabout are you?
I'm in San Francisco right now. So I live between
Beautiful.
San Francisco and Boise, Idaho.
Oh, yeah. I just had another buddy of mine who lives in Boise, Idaho.
Yeah, it's a fabulous place to be. I grew up in Idaho, actually on an alfalfa farm, kind of in the middle of nowhere.
Fantastic. And it's like, is it like you guys have the Rocky Mountains down there?
Yeah. So Boise's a special place. It's like nestled right up against the Bitterroot chain of the Rocky Mountains. It's a beautiful spot.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful. So you guys are just south of us. I'm in Calgary, Alberta. And so we got Rocky Mountains up here too. And it's beautiful.
Oh yeah.
Love it.
We love the mountains for sure.
Absolutely. So let's dive into it. John, what is your story?
What is my story? Well, I grew up in Idaho, as I mentioned before. I grew up I was born into a family that was very poor. My mom and dad actually had both just exited the army themselves, and so they had me when they were very young. I grew up with a father that worked in construction, a very, very hardworking guy. My mom was a stay-at-home mom for myself and my brother and sister. And life was interesting. My dad worked extremely hard. He was an entrepreneur, owned a framing company, started a framing company, did well for himself, accumulated enough cash to buy a farm, which we ended up owning an alfalfa farm, so a hay farm. And then my parents divorced, and life changed dramatically. After my parents divorced, my mom, she had been a stay-at-home mom up until for the 12 years that I was a little boy, and so she was forced to get a job and really enter the marketplace with really no skills. And so she spent 35 years in a grocery store, and when I was a kid, it was really difficult for her to make ends meet. We didn't have a lot of connection to my dad after the divorce, and so it was a real financial struggle for my mom. And as a result, she was working a lot, and as a result, we were placed in some kind of dangerous and abusive situations. And I left home at 15, and so left home at 15. Ended up living with some friends. Friends' parents took me in, and then I ended up enlisting in the military when I was 17. I went to the military. I didn't really know what I was going to do with my life. And I had some really incredibly kind officers that were in charge of me that after a couple of years of service said, you need to go to school and become an officer. And they helped me get a scholarship to school. And so I ended up commissioning as a finance corps officer into the reserves, and spent 14 years total in the Army, leading hundreds of soldiers. And had a really wonderful experience. The Army was good to me. And then kind of concurrently, I ended up starting my civilian career in finance with a consumer goods company. We were a cosmetics and fragrance producer. And then ultimately was recruited by Smucker's, the jam and jelly company, and moved to Cleveland, Ohio, and spent time in the sales finance group, and then ultimately took over the Northwest for the sales team. And headed west again. So I was traveling about 40 weeks a year at that time, and it didn't really matter where I lived. So we ended up moving back to Idaho, myself and my ex-wife. and to start our family. So I'm blessed, tremendously blessed with three boys. They're 8, 10, and 12, incredible kids. And about 10 years, almost, yeah, actually 10 years this next week, I started our first company with my co-founder, Mark Verinder, which was RecorGroup. We ended up seeing an opportunity within the consumer goods space from a brokerage lens. And brokers, if you're not familiar with a CPG broker, Mustafa, they really, what we do is we're a middleman. So we're an outsourced sales and marketing team for brands. So we take brands, products, and we sell them, and we do manage the 4Ps on a day-to-day basis to retailers around the country. So we focus on grocery specifically. We manage about 40 different brands and their portfolios across a multitude of retailers. So my story, that's
Fantastic.
kind of what led me to start my first company. And then I ended up going through a divorce myself, and a really painful divorce that that was just the most gut wrenching part of my life, really. But on the other side of our greatest pain is often our greatest joy. And I met my wife now, Shama. We were both members of EO, and we met at an EO event, actually in Huntington Beach, and fell madly in love. Got married 10 weeks later in Venice, Italy, and so our that's how our story began
Wow.
together. And it's really our story together that spawned our latest company, Big Delta Capital, which we are working at the intersection of women and wealth. And really, like you outlaid in the bio, what we're doing is creating curated networks of expansion opportunities for women, to also provide incredible education and access to real tangible opportunities for women to create wealth, and then use capital to make change in the world.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great story. Wow. You went through a lot.
Thanks.
Very interesting. So, what inspired you to start the capital firm focusing on women specifically?
Yeah, it's a really great question. It's an area of work that I never saw myself in. If you would have asked me 3 years ago would I have been working in this space, I would have said I couldn't see a pathway for that. It was really as Shama and I came together, and I started to understand, really through experience sharing that she was sharing with me, around how different the experience is for women in the corporate world, in the entrepreneurial world, in the investing world. I started to have more of my own experiences, and started to have a whole world open up to me that I hadn't known before. And that it created a lot of empathy for me. As a leader from both the military and the corporate and the entrepreneurial sense, I have operated through the lens of gender equity for a long time. Believing that women and men are equally capable, and they should be equally compensated and equally treated. And I don't think that I viewed it. I don't. The way that I would look at it today from the lens of allyship, when I think about, like, how can we create allyship within the workplace, I don't think men are ill-intended, but sometimes we're not informed. And I have now, through the work that we've been doing with Big Delta Capital, and the work we're doing with women, been really the only man in the room in a lot of circumstances. And so what it has done for me is created a lot more empathy and a lot more understanding. And I think as entrepreneurs, as business leaders, when we think about how can we get the most out of our teams and people, and how can we look at things through the lens of equity, it's through, we as leaders have to create mechanisms that create psychological safety for our people to be able to share their stories, so that we can actually create more empathy in the workplace. And I think that's step one of that journey. So while I'd never realized I'd be in this work, we have really jumped in, like, both feet forward. And what we're doing is we're creating a whole ecosystem around the pillars that I mentioned. And so from really, this started as my wife creating a podcast a year ago. and her podcast is fantastic. It's called Getting Rich Together. And she created this really out of this idea that coming from her divorce of how do I create wealth? And in her marriage, it was her husband was controlling the finances, and she really hadn't been empowered to really think about these things. And so she, as she loves telling the story, and she tells it incredibly well. She emailed out 50 girlfriends and said, "Who wants to talk about money?" And only 2 people responded back and raised their hands to say, "Yes, I'd like to be on this journey and learn." And the rest of the women did not want to talk about money. And so what that did for Shama was open up this idea of we need to start demystifying money and to create, remove the taboos around money so that we can start having the conversations, so that we can start to have opportunity and share opportunity and expansion of what's possible. And so that was the impetus for us starting this company. And from that now has come a whole conference series that we're producing and running now. And our first event is actually next week, on next Thursday, the 27th, in San Francisco. And we're going to have over 100 women at the event. And it's an opportunity really to, again, focus around curation of networks, really to understand like what are the possibilities. And so when we look at it from the standpoint of what are the possibilities from an investment standpoint, like on one side you have VC and angel investing on like the more higher risk side, and then over here you have 401k on the low risk side, and then in between here is like an unlimited set of options. And what are those options? And so what we're trying to do is really to expand what's possible for women, to really help to empower and to create opportunities for women to generate wealth, and then to be able to take wealth and capital and make change in the world with it.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I know you said you serve women, but tell us about what group of women do you serve, like in terms of your
Sure.
target market, and what do you do for them or with them?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So, in serving, I'll just say this first. In serving women in what we're producing and what we're creating, we not only serve women, we serve spouses, partners, and families. And the work that Shama and I are doing is focused around women, because women have historically been disenfranchised within the realm of money and investing. And so it's important to give this context, that we are in the midst of the great wealth transfer. So we have over $30 trillion with a T that are changing hands into the hands of women in the next 7 to 10 years. And what we have experienced and what the data and the research shows is that only 28% of women feel confident investing their money. And so what we're seeking to do, what our target market fit is trying to, and what we're trying to do with our platforms, is to close that confidence gap so that women do feel confident investing their money. They feel confident having that power. And with that being said, if we don't close that gap, the news on this really is that $3 trillion will actually come out of the economy if we don't close that gap. That impacts business, it impacts the economy, and impacts men, women, children, everyone in the economy. And it limits and stifles innovation and growth and possibility. And so what we're really seeking to do is help close that gap, and to really help women to really do that. And so that at the end of the day, the focus areas that we, in terms of, to answer your original question, is the podcast is really aimed at all women, regardless of age or where they're at in their career in life. The conference series is really geared towards women that are around 35 to 60, that are not new into their career, that have been in their careers, they've been founders, they've experienced some inflow of cash, they have done some investing, but they know there's more. And so the conference series is really focused around what are those expansion opportunities, and how can we generate more? How can we generate more, and then use capital again to make change in the world?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So you said there's about $7 trillion is moving into women's hands, right? Did I get that
Uh,
wrong?
30 trillion.
How do you figure that number? How is that happening?
Yeah, there's a number of data points on this, but it's really centered around the what we call the Great Wealth Transfer. So that is really relative to all of the boomers that are starting to retire and pass away, and so a lot of that transfer of assets is happening because of the death of the prior generations, and so we're in the midst. It's the greatest transfer of wealth in human history right now, and like I said, $30 trillion. There's some really wonderful articles and research around this. Ellevest, which is an incredible company that champions women empowerment investing, they did an incredible article around this as well. But lots of data points to show that it's actually probably upwards of $30 trillion that'll be changing hands into the hands of women.
And so, is that in US only or across the world, or where is it?
That's globally.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of cash.
It's a tremendous amount of cash. And as you
But it's
know,
not just
Mustafa,
cash, right? It's just different forms of wealth.
sure, if a spouse is passing away and that spouse's brokerage account, or even hard assets, real estate, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Everything. Wow.
Yeah.
And so, I guess you talked about closing the confidence gap and showing them how to invest and becoming build a better relationship with money and being
Yeah.
open about talking about it and getting help and the rest of it. How do you guys go about solving all of those problems?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So a lot of it is through community and conversation. And so coming from the podcast, that was the podcast was the initial impetus for all of this, and really, um, the conversations on the podcast really seek to normalize conversation around money. And so, as
Mhm.
you know, our money stories, all of us have a money story, by the way, all of us.
Right.
And it's so interesting in the work that we've done. We speak with a lot of incredibly wealthy people, billionaire. We've spoken with billionaire folks, both men and women, that have poverty consciousness, that think about, oh my gosh, everything could disappear tomorrow. And while it's not necessarily rational, it's grounded in the original money story. And usually those money stories are generated in our childhood by looking at the modeling from our parents and how they dealt with money, or traumatic or positive experiences that we've had as young adults. But the formative years of our money stories really happen by observing how our family or caregivers dealt with money. And so what we seek to do is normalize that conversation, create spaces like I was mentioning earlier around allyship, create spaces where people feel psychological safety. They feel safe to be able to share their money stories, because it's in the acknowledgement of that story that we get to rewrite those things. We get to revise the patterns of our lives. And so we get to seek out new ways of doing things. And so through conversation, through the incredible speakers that we have in our conference. And so we're doing our conferences very differently as well. We're actually doing our conferences as all panels and fireside discussions. We made a decision not to have, like a Barbara Corcoran come in and speak from a lens of like a big, powerful woman that had created an empire, 30 years ago. We wanted to have people that are similar to the women in the room, that are able to share from a first person experience share. And so we're doing it very differently. We're having all sorts of different topics in that conversation. And then a way that we're doing it, even taking it a step further beyond the conferences, is we have built a community through a software platform that will be an online community to be able to continue the conversation from the conference series, to be able to not only continue the conversation, but to continue to have that network of people, to have education. We have education partners that we're partnering with that'll be doing webinars. We'll be doing, my wife will also be hosting events on the site as well. And then ultimately, as we build this platform out, we're going to host a deal exchange and deal flow platform within this as well. So those are some of the areas that we're looking at in terms of how do we close the gap. But as we're building out Big Delta Capital, one of the big ways that we see that we have to close the gap in the future is going to be through policy. And so on our long-term plan, as we look 3 to 5 years out, we also are looking to have a policy center within our company that will be focused around legislative policy, because quite frankly, it's not enough to do things in the private sector. We have to do them in the public sector as well.
Interesting. You got some good work coming up. Um, um, let's talk about a brief example or case study of a client you work with. How did you find them, and what was the challenge they were having?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. It's been so interesting in the work that we're doing. We don't have specifically individual clients in this work that we're doing right at the, as we can like think about it from that perspective of like a B2B sale. Um, we're really working to really serve a wide swath of women. And so when we think about it from the lens of how do we do that, it's really through these different pillars of our platform. And so what's going to be really what we're seeing is so much gravitation and so much support in the work that we're doing, especially around these conference series. It has been incredible to see how much outpouring of support we've gotten from folks. And it's also been really interesting to see as policy in the United States has rapidly changed this year, and DEI and programming from the federal level has gone out the window. It's been interesting to see how corporations have responded from like a sponsorship lens too. So it's a very interesting time where a lot of things are kind of in flux. And this is probably no more. There's no more important time ever in our lifetimes to be doing this work. So it's interesting as we started this company through the lens of really creating this business framework to make impact in the world, how quickly it's changed from to be a very, very highly mission driven, almost what feels like activism now that we're working on. So it's a very different lens than I've ever operated under, and also just something that we are incredibly passionate about, and that is really getting us out of bed every day, and we can't wait to see what's going on next. But the women that we are looking to serve in our conference series, we're so excited to see what the impacts of our first event are going to be on those women.
Beautiful. Love it. That's amazing. I mean, I mean, you could do so. Another question. I guess you could serve a lot of people or everybody, but then you decided to focus on women. Other than financial education, do you guys also are you in the business of lending these women money for to run their business or whatever they have going on?
No, that's not the area that we're working in. From the lens that we're working in right now is what we discussed around creating networks, and creating and really, from a network perspective, what's important about networks is as you get to be in community with people, you get to see things for yourself that you never dreamed that were possible for yourself. And so when I think about my own passion in this business, it's really when I think about what is my why in this business, it was really with the idea that of looking at my childhood. And I mentioned to you, my mom was ostensibly a single mother, operating in the world and trying to make the ends meet every single day, and it was living paycheck to paycheck. And I think about if my mom would have had access to even a group of women that said, hey Mary Jo, like these are some possibilities for you. Like I wonder how different my life could have been and how different the life of my brother and sister could have been. And so when I think about that and explode that out in a macro sense, how many families are dealing with similar things today? And how many children are going to bed each night with their mom working and trying to make ends meet and not knowing how they're going to provide for the family, and certainly not even close to thinking about how I could retire. And that's
Right.
really that's the why behind things for me, is really looking at it from the lens of how much good can we do in the world by bringing people together to be able to talk about money. That's number one. How can we provide world-class education from partners that have put these things together, that have incredible tools to be able to offer to women. And then thirdly is what are those opportunities? And so as we look to the future of our organization and what we're building out, we'll likely never be a lender of money, but what we do hope to be is a source and a catalyst for ideas and for opportunities that are tangible. And so what we are hoping to host on our community platform will be a deal exchange and deal flow platform that will give women access to potential deals that they may not have ever seen before. And again, with that mindset of expansion, opportunity, and education.
Yeah. The more I think about it, the happier I get with who you're serving. Like a lot of women, I think, um, are not really used to being in charge of money
Mm,
because in a lot of households, the husband is working full time, mom is at home, or they're not really working too much to make money. The men are sometimes, if not usually, the breadwinner for the house, and so women are just like, they're, yeah, my husband is going to take care of it, and so they don't really even try to control the money because the man is doing it. And then if there's a divorce, if he passes away or whatever happens, then now all of a sudden it's a big wake up call that they need to go out there, make money, manage money, invest, and do the whole 9 years.
yeah, it's an interesting time that we find ourselves in. I think the roles of men and women have changed dramatically. And I think we're still looking to the past at the old archetypes of what it means to be a man or a woman, or certainly a husband and wife, and in the traditional sense. And I think those things are starting to come apart. They're not relevant in today's world anymore. And so we are, I think, as a people, as men and women, struggling to find what that balance is. I think business for so long has been run, probably since the dawn of business, has been run with a very immature masculine energy of aggressive doing. And I think when you look at women being in the workforce, it's really only been in the last 40 years, and then really only in the last 20 that women have really advanced beyond like the secretarial pool. And so you look at, it wasn't until the late 70s women could even have credit cards. Isn't that a mind-blowing thing if you think about?
I
Like
didn't know
it's
that.
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah, women had to have their husbands sign off for a credit card. So when you think
Late
about, like,
70s.
yes, it's crazy. So when you think about where we're at in time, and women being in the workforce now in the way that they are, these things are new, and then we're running up against our own ideas of what that means. And so when you look at it from the standpoint of business being run in this immature masculine energy, and women have now been forced to kind of meet that. And so now we're having energetic mismatches in the world today. And that's really what's happening. And so the more that we can acknowledge our own individuality, acknowledge the fact that we're special just exactly how we've been made, and we can acknowledge those things. We have empathy for each other, and we can create cultures of equality within the workplace. It leads to better engagement, it leads to better happiness, and it leads to better loyalty amongst the team. And innovation goes up, profit goes up, and sales go up as a result of all of those things. So not only is it a case of should we be equals, it's actually good for business. And so there's a
Yeah.
business case to it all as well.
Yeah. I mean, tapping into people's knowledge, wisdom, expertise, and their genius, whether they're men or women. I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't do a good job of that. It's
Yeah,
like they try to do too much, they don't delegate enough, and they don't tap into their team's
that's right.
genius, whether they're
It,
men or women. Like women have massive potential in doing a lot of things.
Oh, of course. And I think it's what's cool about that is, like, when you look at it, there's a multitude of research studies by Boston Consulting, McKinsey. They show that men and women have often very different kind of innate skill sets, but they're very complementary. So if we acknowledge these complementary skill sets and we empower people to show up not necessarily with this masculine, aggressive energy of doing, that we show up as our whole selves in the workplace, we actually have complementary skill sets, and we can find a balance between the masculine and feminine energies in the workplace that becomes a really positive thing for business. And so, like you mentioned, like, look, I've, as a founder and of a startup in the past, like in startup now, it's, look, there's a lot of doing that we have to do, and sometimes we're running so hard and we're working 16-hour days to make something happen. And it can be, we get sucked into that. But it's taking a step back and saying, and one of the things that at RecorGroup, what I've created for our management team, I call it leading with love. And the number one principle around that is the humble recognition that we're all people trying to do our best. And if we operate from that lens, if we operate with love, and by the way, love doesn't mean that I'm a pushover. It means what love for me means is I'm going to have extremely high standards. I'm going to set standards of excellence. I'm going to have accountabilities that are clear. Everybody knows what their role is in their organization. Things are clear. Communication is clear. And I hold folks to this standard of excellence. And that's one of the most loving things that you can do for an organization and for the people themselves.
Fantastic. John, let's talk about some of the milestones you guys have achieved along the way since you started. When did you start your capital company?
Yeah, so we started Big Delta this past year. So we're really, really new. We're really new. Shama started the podcast in April. And then we really started putting the framework of Big Delta together, I'd say around June of last year. So it's relatively
almost a year.
New experience, but I'll tell you what, we have had some great milestones and wins along the way. We were awarded a Titan Award for Entrepreneur Investors of the Year within the female investing space. We've made over 25 investments into female-founded, female-owned companies. And Shama's podcast continues to win incredible awards. She just won an award from the American Writers Association a couple of weeks ago. She's won a Stevie for the podcast. And her podcast is now a top 100 investing podcast in the US. So from the lens of picking up steam and creating within this framework, while we're new, the steam has just been like accelerated. It's just been accelerating as we're meeting more and more, both men and women that are championing the work that we're doing. It seems like it's snowballing. It's a snowball effect. And it's still, while it still feels like we're pushing the boulder up the hill, it really feels like we're starting to see the summit of that. And I really do think that there is no more important time in history than the present to be doing some of the work that we're doing, especially given the political climate we're operating in today.
Absolutely. What would you say are some of the challenges that you guys faced along the way?
Yeah, I think right now, our sponsorship conversations have been interesting. We were in these various stages of nurturing businesses for support of the events that we're producing. And while we've had a number of sponsors that are responding extremely favorably to the work that we're doing, there has also been a number of sponsors that have had to basically kind of pull back from the table because of the disillusion of some of the DEI, well, actually all of the DEI legislation that was placed in the federal government. And so it's been an interesting one as we have been continuing to build out our platform. We've actually had folks suggest that maybe we should be doing things in a very different way to be able to relate with the environment as it exists today. And so that's been an interesting one as we're kind of seeing, what is the market that we're really creating a market right now. And so we're having to understand, like, how do we build within this market framework, and what are all the hurdles that we face. And that when I said a little bit ago, it feels like it's become like almost an activist campaign that we're on now. It does feel like that in some ways because, the conversations we had been having around inclusion, around gender equity, around gender pay gaps, all of those things, the tone of a lot of those conversations has changed from some of the corporations that we were talking with. So I think it's going to be really interesting for us. The challenge will be to really remain clear about our mission, and to be able to stay true to that mission is what we're going to do. But the challenge, I think, along the way is really finding the partners that aren't going to be necessarily impacted by politics, and that see the vision that we're building and want to be a part of it.
Politics. Very interesting. What would you say is holding you or your business back right now?
Um, really, for since we're really just in the startup phase of this next evolution, our manpower right now is has been really difficult. Yeah, we're truly in the startup phase, which is an interesting place. In my core company, RecorGroup, I had really I had worked for a long time to put together an incredible leadership team. Mark Verinder and myself that started the company. We've formed an incredible team of folks to manage that company on a day-to-day basis, which has given me a lot of freedom to pursue what we're doing now. But I will say that being back in the startup mode is a very different place than
Yes.
I was at a year ago.
Yes. I have a similar experience where I started a bunch of companies before. Then I'm like, all right, I've got this figured out. I think I
Yeah.
know what I'm doing. And then you go in it, and you're like, oh my God.
Yes. Yes.
It's still tough. I mean, you know what to do, but it's still tough.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's an interesting, EO. We often talk about the beginner's mindset, and so it's really, I'm finding it like, oh, like we should just do this or do that, and but it's not the same anymore. Like things change too. Like our skills, if we don't use them at the startup phase, like those startup skills of doing things like and getting things done, they change over time. And so like it's an interesting place to say like I think I know how to do this, but like this is a very different animal, and it's going to take a different set of skills to do this. So
Yes.
yeah, which is cool, and we get to find the right people. And the really neat thing is we continue to have people gravitate towards what we're doing and offer their services, offer their time, their talents, because they believe in the mission that we believe in.
Absolutely. But I think on the other side of the coin is when you do a new startup, your previous skills, you could use some of it and you don't make the same dumb mistakes that we did before. And
Yes.
it's like, I know we shouldn't do that. Here's the way we should go. Here's the target market, or here's the pricing or the packaging, or how I go about hiring, firing,
Yeah.
building a team, the whole,
Yeah.
nine. Like, yes, it could be a different industry like that you're starting in, but some of the skills and knowledge is transferable to, a new business. And
Yeah.
I think the learning curve is shorter, and the amount of what I would call is let's call it stupid mistakes is a lot lower than taking 3 years to learn you know what you should do.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that I think was the most impactful in my business with Recore Group was the implementation of the EOS framework. Are you familiar with EOS?
I've heard of it. Well, is that the Gino Wickman's?
It is, yeah. So it's the entrepreneurial operating system, and we implemented that into Recore Group. It's probably about 4.5 years ago, and I'll say it's such a simple set of processes and framework to run the company from. It made probably the most difference of anything that we had ever done in our company, and we operate as an EOS run company today, and it is an incredible set of tools that really frees the teams up to do business. And so I always recommend and encourage folks towards that. But that is one thing as we started our business, our new venture, that we are definitely running through EOS. That was definitely a learning for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. um can I ask you a couple of almost personal questions?
Of course.
Beauty, do you read books?
Yeah, I do.
And what would you say are two of your favorite books of all time?
Oh my gosh. My one of the most profound books that I may has made the most difference in my life is The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And that book just goes into the incredible it led me to a real awakening within myself of becoming more aware of myself, aware of the voice in my head, and really like a deeper listening within myself. I'd say actually like
Untethered
kind of
Soul.
on the I'm sorry, go ahead, Mustafa.
So the name was Untethered Soul.
Yeah, the untethered soul.
All right.
Yeah,
What's the second one?
the other book that I would say that also was in that vein, that I actually read first, that kind of gave me that started really what I would call my own personal awakening and self development, was a book called Awareness by Anthony DeMello, and he was a Jesuit priest, an Indian Jesuit priest, and he wrote that book back in the '60s. And it's an incredible book about basically about awareness and about deep listening within yourself, and that is something that
Beautiful.
um, yeah, my wife and I are deeply spiritual people, and we spend a lot of time listening to what our inner beings say, and how we can do the best things that we can in the world and become better, more self-actualized humans.
Have you read The Big Leap
I
by
have, I love it. Gay
it's
Hendricks.
another good one. Gay Hendricks.
Yes,
Yeah, that was a good
yes,
one.
love that book. In fact, it's I have in my office. I have a huge bookshelf of one of my very favorite things to do is to gift books to people, and so Big Leap. I always keep a number of copies to be able to give out to folks.
What about Psycho-Cybernetics? Have you read that one?
I have not.
That's another good one. It's about understanding your. The name is weird, but it's about understanding your own psychology. And that, yeah, that was a book. One of the few books. The Big Leap, Psycho-Cybernetics, and another book called Working with the Law.
Oh,
Working with the Law is kind of explains the what's happening and how the world kind of how the universe works by John Hollywell. I think that's the name.
hmm.
And then Psycho-Cybernetics talks about our own psychology and understanding yourself. I was high reading that book. And then The Big Leap was similar. I was like,
Yeah,
oh my God, this is amazing. This is so another
yeah.
good one.
I love the Big Leap. It's a really phenomenal book.
It is a good book. I was actually thinking about literally rereading it again because, yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, I thought what I like about the Big Leap is Gay Hendricks he talks about like energy, and what I like about it is he talks a lot about zone of genius, and when we find that thing that we are the best in the world at, that we are filled with energy from doing that. And I do a lot of coaching even within my own company around finding zone of genius, and
Yeah,
because it's that area where it's that area where it's not going to deplete you, it's going to actually like fill you with energy, and it's that thing that we are meant to do on this planet. And I really love his message around that.
absolutely love it. John, what's one advice that made a big impact on your life or business?
Oh, I when you said that one piece of advice, I think about that. I think about the Teddy Roosevelt quote that says, "Comparison is the thief of joy." And I think that for me in my life, when the happiest that I have been in my life is when I am not searching for something outside of myself to make myself happy. And when I can find peace within myself and I don't have to rearrange my external environment to find that peace, that's when I know that I am where I'm supposed to be.
Love it. Comparison is a thief of joy.
Yes. And I think the problem today that we suffer in our society is with the rise of social media. I think
Yeah,
COVID was an instigator of a lot of this as well. Is that we compare ourselves to people all the time, and we really only show the most glorious parts of our lives on social media. And that people, that's if you want. I always tell my wife, if you want to feel really bad about yourself, like spend like 10 minutes on LinkedIn. And you'll always be like, I'm not doing enough in the world. But it's the reality is,
Yeah.
finding that peace and joy for yourself on the inside is what's important.
Yeah.
The
I
rest of
think,
it's
yeah, it
noise.
is. It is a problem these days. Like people on Instagram, TikTok,
Totally.
LinkedIn, just showing or demonstrating what a lot of people call a fake personality.
Yep.
And or even if it's real, people go watch that stuff and do a lot of comparison. Like this guy is driving a Lambo, I'm driving a POS. This guy
Yep.
has so much money in this house and this much in their bank. I don't have that. So, oh my God, I'm terrible. I'm not enough.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
right. Yeah, you hit it. That's exactly right. I think that that comparison really leads to this unworthiness of like, oh, I must not be doing something right because I don't have all of these material possessions. And I think that's one of the things that as I continue to get older, I mean, look, we're all human beings, and I'm a human being, and like living a human experience too, and we're not immune to these things. But the what I am seeking to do in my life is to pay less attention to that noise and pay more attention to what I hear on the inside, and to really like find a place of peace for myself inside here versus out here in the world. And it's
fantastic.
from that place of peace that we get to create in our highest selves. And the work that we're doing now, from an impact standpoint, comes from that place. It comes from our inner beings.
Beautiful. John, this was a great conversation. You shared a lot of good stuff. Your story, who you serve, what you do for them. Is there a question that I should have asked and I didn't? That if I did, it would have maybe added value to people watching or listening?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. I would just say to the audience, stay curious, and to really use curiosity, and not judgment. I think the world will be a better place.
Beautiful. Where can people find out more about you, what you do, and what you're up to?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn, Jonathan Bunten. Also, you can take a look at the conference series that we're producing at www.women.win, or you can look us up on our website at Big Delta Capital.
BigDeltaCapital.com
That's correct.
and then women.win.
That's
So
correct.
it's not women.win.com, it's women.win.
Yeah,
WIN.
the domain is .win.
.win. Beautiful. So,
Yeah.
gang, if you're a woman, if you know a woman or lady that could benefit from getting some financial support and financial education, reach out to John on LinkedIn or go to their website, Women That Win, and get a feel for what they're up to. And if it's a good fit, go check them out. And if you have
Thank
any
you.
questions, reach out to him and to his team. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, John. This was great. I really learned a lot, and learning more about your business was amazing as well. Gang, if you're watching or listening, if you know someone that could benefit from this content, please share the link with them so they could, share the value and the information and knowledge with them. And if you have any questions for me or John, just put them in the comments on the platform you're watching. We'll do our best to get back to you. You'll be watching another episode of the Executive Hub Show. Your host Mustafa Hosseini here with my guest Jonathan Bunten. Hope you guys have a great day, great week, and we'll see you on our next episode. Bye now.
Thank you.